Hi guys, good morning or good afternoon. Today we're going to be taking notes on graphing linear equations. It's going to be more of a review, but I don't think we fully learned this, so it might feel like new content for us. So we're going to title this Math Notes page 15. And it's going to be graphing linear equations. Graphing linear equations. Now, something that is review is this slope-intercept form. Does anyone remember what the slope-intercept form is? You can type it in the chat. It's the equation I told you that you can use when you're finding the equation of a line. It's kind of like the template that we use in math. Y equals, if anybody wants to type it in the chat, they can. So some of you guys got it. The slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And the reason it's called slope-intercept form is because, you could probably guess it, you have a slope, which remember is rise over run. And then the b is your intercept, which is known as your y-intercept. So when you write it, it would be 0, comma, whatever b is. That's your y-intercept. That's a number. So this right here is actually a number. So this is a number. That's a number. That represents a number. So when you're graphing an equation in the y equals mx plus b form, step number 1 is just to plot the y-intercept. And then step number 2, use the slope to find the second intercept, or we could say point. And then step number 3 is just connect the dots and make your line. All right, so I'm going to give you guys an example. We'll call this example 1. And let's say you're given an equation of a line that's in y equals mx plus b form already. So when something is in the y equals mx plus b form, we can start the process of just getting our y-intercept, getting our slope, graphing, and then connecting our intercepts, and then creating our line. So this equation is already in y equals mx plus b. I know this is minus b, so technically we could say that this is plus negative 3. And then it would be exactly in y equals mx plus b form. So we could say this is y equals 1/2 x plus negative 3. But it doesn't matter, because if we look here, our y-intercept is negative 3. And if we look here, our y-intercept is negative 3. So if we're writing our y-intercept is going to be 0, comma, negative 3, even if one of them has minus 3 and one of them has plus negative 3. Same thing. All right, so we found our y-intercept. Now let's find our slope. And our slope, remember, we use the letter m. And our slope is the number that's in front of x. It's the coefficient of x. Remember the word coefficient? And our y-intercept is our constant. Our constant means it's a number without a letter. So our y-intercept is our constant. Our slope is the coefficient, or the number that's in front of x. And the number that's in front of x is 1/2. So we're going to say our slope is 1/2. Cool. So step number 1 says plot the y-intercept. So I would draw, and this does not have to be perfect, guys. There's human error here because we're drawing this graph. You just have to know which one is your y-axis and which one is your x-axis. And obviously you need to know where 0, 0 is, but I think all of you guys know where 0, 0 is. It's where the lines intersect, the y-axis and the x-axis. Okay, so let's plot the y-intercept. The y-intercept is 0, negative 3. So here's the y-intercept, and negative 3 is around here on the y-intercept. So I'm going to draw it. 1, negative 2, negative 3. Now I'm going to put a red point there. Perfect. I just did step 1. I plotted the y-intercept. Now step number 2 says use the slope to find the second intercept. My slope is 1 over 2. Rise over run. So I'm going to rise 1 and run 2. So I'm going to do it in green. I'm going to rise 1, and I'm going to do the next in yellow and run 2. And when I rise 1 and I run 2, I get my second point. That's pretty cool. Step number 3 says connect the points and construct your line. So I'm going to connect these points. And make my line. That's it. Now in a separate window, I'm going to have you guys graph your own line so that we can practice. So I want you guys to go click on whiteboard.fi so that we can actually practice this on the side. Cool. So after practicing, hopefully you guys see just the process a little bit more clear. Here's your second example. I want you to identify the slope and y-intercept. So here is the first equation. Y equals x plus 4. So all I want you to do is to identify the slope and identify the y-intercept. And then in this second problem, or equation, I want you to identify the slope and the y-intercept. So identify the slope and identify the y-intercept. Identify the slope and identify the y-intercept. So you guys can tell me in the chat, what's the slope of A and what's the y-intercept of A? And then what's the slope of B and what's the y-intercept of B? Cool, so a lot of you guys told me that my y-intercept is this 0, 4 because that's the constant. First things first, our equation is in y equals mx plus b form because you have your y isolated on the left-hand side. You have your next variable, which is your x. It has a coefficient, even though you can't see it, it does have a coefficient. And then it has plus or minus a constant. So that's in y equals mx plus b form. So my y-intercept is, as most of you guys found, 0, 4. Good, I found my y-intercept. Now my slope I know was confusing for a lot of us. So when the x is by itself and it doesn't have a coefficient written in front of it, that implies that there is a 1 right there. Basically, you have 1x, right? If you just have an x by itself, that means you have 1x. Now, the slope has to be in fraction form because remember, the slope is rise over run, right? So the slope for A, if you want to make things easy for you, your slope is just 1 over 1. because the coefficient that's in front of the variable is 1, and you can put a 1 under it. So your slope is 1 over 1. You always want to have your slope in a fraction form because you want to know how much you go up or down, which is your rise, and how much you go right or left, which is your run. So your slope, you actually do want a fraction. A fraction is what makes it easiest. So it's kind of funny how when you guys are working like inputting and outputting, you probably don't want a fraction. You probably freak out a little. But when you're graphing, you want a fraction because your slope, that means you go up 1, right 2. Here you're like, what is it again? Oh yeah, it's 1 over 1. So I go up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1. And we can even write that on the side. We could say, okay, so this means I'm going to go up 1, right 1. Okay? So if we were graphing it, let's graph it super quick. All right, I'm going to zoom out. Let's graph it super quick. So it's going to be a mini graph. So I'm going to plot 0, 4. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to put a point there. And my slope is up 1, right 1. So I'm going to go up 1, right 1. And there's my line. I know it's tiny, so we can practice this one after. Now I'm going to pause, and in the chat, I want you guys to tell me what the slope is for B and what the y-intercept is for B. All right, guys, so in the chat, a lot of you guys indicated what the y-intercept is. Remember, we need to make sure that our equation is in y equals mx plus b form, which this one is. So now we can just identify which one our y-intercept is. And our y-intercept is positive 8. So we have 0, 8. And then our slope is the coefficient of x. And the coefficient of x is negative 3. So our slope is negative 3, not positive 3, negative 3, because there's a negative in front of the 3. So my slope is negative 3. But remember, we want our slope as a fraction because slope is rise over run. So we want a fraction to make things easier. Now, what's a number that I can put under every number? 1. So my slope is negative 3 over 1, which means I'm going to go down 3, right 1. Because the 3 is negative. So that means I'm going to go down 3 and then right 1 because the 1 is positive. So right 1. So if I were to graph this, you guys can graph this with me. I'm going to go to 0, 8, and I'm just going to say that 0, 8 is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. I'm going to say 8 is right there. The white dot. Okay? Now this means I'm going to go down 3, right 1. So I'm going to go down 3, 1, 2, 3, right 1. Connect the dots. And it's not going to be perfect. Your graph is going to look a little different. But basically what I want you guys to see is, do you guys remember at the beginning of like November, I taught you guys positive slope and negative slope? So if you look at your slope for A, this is a positive slope, right? And then look at your line. It's a positive slope. It's a positive line. And then look at this one. It's a negative slope. So you have a negative line. So always keep the bigger picture in mind.